While I was living abroad trying to rebuild my life, I got a call that knocked the air out of my chest. My grandma's condo, the only place in the world where I ever felt chosen, was gone, sold behind my back. My lawyer reviewed the paperwork and whispered, "Silly girl," right before he told me the signature wasn't hers. And the next morning when my sister called bragging about how smoothly she handled everything, she had no idea the truth was already walking straight toward her. My name is Jarek Rourke, and this is the story I never thought I'd have to tell. But before I share it with you, I'd love to know you're here with me. Just say, listening in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. I always find comfort in knowing someone out there hears me. Thank you. And now, here's my story. And if you feel for what happened, if any part of this makes your chest tighten the way mine did, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps more than you know, and it tells me I'm not telling this story alone. While I was living abroad trying to rebuild my life, I got a call that knocked the air out of my lungs. My grandma's condo, the one place where I'd ever felt truly chosen, was gone, sold behind my back. My lawyer scanned the documents, paused, and muttered, "Silly girl," right before telling me the signature wasn't hers. And the next morning when my sister called bragging about how smoothly she'd handled everything, she had no idea the truth was already walking straight toward her. My name is Jarek Rourke, and on that October morning in Kyoto, I learned that silence, distance, and trust can be the sharpest knives someone uses against you. I had been in Japan for nearly 6 months, living in a tiny room above a quiet alleyway near a Shinto shrine. Kyoto in the fall always felt like a postcard. Someone kept dipping into gold light maples turning crimson, the scent of roasting chestnuts drifting through markets, the old train line humming like a lullaby. I'd built a life there that felt safe, predictable. A life where no one compared me to my sister, no one asked why I didn't come home, and no one looked at me like I was the disappointment who ran away from real responsibilities. Between my classes in media arts, my freelance design jobs, and my late-night walks along the Kamogawa River, I'd almost convinced myself I'd escaped the weight of my family altogether. But that morning, as I stood barefoot on the cold wooden floor, French press in one hand, laptop open on the counter, an email popped up from Dean Halden, my grandmother's lawyer. The subject line was a punch to the ribs, urgent. Call me. For a second, I figured it was some tax issue or a question about a notarization. Something mild, solvable, annoying at worst. I dialed anyway. The line crackled across the Pacific, and as a train screeched past the window, Dean didn't bother with small talk. Jarek, the condo has been sold. Everything inside me stalled. Sold by who, you, he said, voice steady. At least, according to these documents. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I'd never touched anything related to that condo since the day my grandmother passed. I hadn't even stepped foot in Savannah since the funeral. Dean must have sensed the silence tightening on my end because he continued with a slow, deliberate tone. I'm sending the scans now. You'll want to see them. My email dinged. A file opened. And there it was. My name. My supposed signature. My authorization to sell the one thing that had ever been mine in that family. Except the signature wasn't mine. Not even close. My heart hammered as I studied the pressure of the pen strokes, the awkward slant, the heavy downward drag at the end of my last name. This isn't me, I whispered. Dean exhaled sharply. I didn't think so. The notary stamp is off. The dates don't align. The signature looks rehearsed. Then almost to himself he muttered, "Silly girl." She really thought no one would look twice. A chill spread down my spine. There was only one she who had the access, the nerve, and the arrogance to pull something like this off. Maribel, my sister. The daughter who stayed. The daughter everyone praised. The daughter who never missed a chance to remind me that I'd left. Dean's tone shifted, turning clinical. I'll pull the logs. Bank transfers. Property filings. Everything. Don't speak to your family yet. Especially not Maribel. I won't, I said, though my jaw clenched at her name. Outside, rain began tapping against the glass, gentle at first, then steadier, Kyoto's quiet way of echoing the storm building in me. I set my phone down, walked to my desk, and opened the folder where I kept all of Grandma Harlow's old emails. One subject line caught my eye, a message she'd written months before she died where she told me, "Don't let anyone determine your worth, Jarek. That's your job." I'd always heard it as comfort. That morning for the first time it sounded like a warning. I spent that entire evening wandering Kyoto without really seeing anything. The lanterns along Pontocho glowed, the smell of grilled yakitori drifted through the air, and groups of students spilled out of izakayas laughing, but all of it blurred into noise behind the pounding in my chest. By the time I ducked into a small cafe near my apartment, ordered a coffee I barely tasted, and opened my laptop, I already knew I wasn't just fighting over property. I was dredging up everything I'd tried to outrun. I opened the email archives first. Years' worth of messages from my grandmother sat there like folded letters in a box, waiting for a version of me brave enough to read them properly. As I scrolled, each memory rose like a photograph: summers in Savannah, the moss-covered sidewalks, the echoing halls of her condo, where I'd sit sketching at her dining table while she brewed mint tea. She used to rest her hand on my shoulder and say, "Jarek, you were never meant to shrink for anyone." She knew exactly what it felt like to be the one people misunderstood. And then came the memory I'd avoided the day of her will reading. After the funeral service, we'd gathered in the parlor of a family friend's house, the air thick with dollar store lilies and whispers. I remember standing stiff beside my mother as Dean read the will out loud. The condo in Savannah to me, the savings accounts divided fairly, personal items assigned with intention. Maribel forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My mother didn't smile at all. My aunt muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "The one who leaves always gets rewarded." And like an idiot, I felt guilty. Guilty for inheriting something that wasn't meant for anyone but me. Back in the cafe, I scrolled through old correspondence from Dean. One thread caught my eye. Months earlier, he'd sent an email CCing me, my mother, and my aunt, reconfirming that the condo was legally and exclusively mine. At the time, I'd skimmed it. But now when I checked the reply history, I froze. My mother had responded to him privately, not CCing me, asking to discuss certain details of the distribution. I sat back, a cold heat rising in my chest. They had talked about my inheritance behind my back. They'd planned something. Maybe not the forgery, but something. Then came the second blow. Deep in my inbox, I found an old email from my grandmother's secondary account. The subject line was simple: "Keep this safe." Inside, she'd attached a scan of her will and written, "Don't sign anything about the condo unless Dean speaks to you in person." I had started and forgotten. I'd been packing for a flight back to Asia that week, and between deadlines and classes, I'd never gone back to reread it. The guilt hit hard and sharp. My silence had been a door someone else walked through. I organized everything: screenshots, emails, scanned signatures, old photos of her handwriting, into a new folder named Harlow Truth. As each file dropped into place, so did the realization that this wasn't some impulsive mistake by Maribel. This had been brewing for years, shaped by the same hierarchy I'd grown up under. The child who left didn't matter. The child who stayed was owed everything. When I finally shut the laptop, Kyoto had gone dark outside the cafe windows. My phone lit up beside my cup. Maribel's name hovered on the screen like a bruise waiting to be touched. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the call button. Part of me wanted answers. Another part wanted to unload every ounce of betrayal sitting in my chest. But Dean's voice echoed in my head, "Don't speak to your family yet." So I let the screen go black. And in the reflection, for the first time, I saw not the version of me who left home, but the version who might finally stop running. The day after I dug through every email document and memory tied to my grandmother's condo, Kyoto felt heavier than usual. A thin curtain of rain floated across the window of my apartment, soft enough to sound harmless, steady enough to remind me that storms rarely start with thunder. I spent most of the afternoon glued to my laptop, the blue glow reflecting off the papers scattered around me. Di chukchuki an chupdi. Santat kajuak gomlain hun hungman shuang cholap vao bo kung su that. My coffee had gone cold when my phone buzzed against the table. A message from a number I didn't recognize lit up the screen. "You've been asking questions. Stop. No punctuation, no name. Just a threat, wrapped in minimalism. I stared at it, pulse tightening. Only a handful of people knew I was digging. All of them had something to lose. Instead of fear flattening me, something else began to crystallize inside my chest, a strange clarity. For the first time, it felt like someone else was the one panicking, not me. I downloaded a call recorder, immediately ran a test, deleted the test, then placed the phone face down within reach. Every part of me felt alert in a way I hadn't been in years. I'd spent most of my life letting things slide, comments, insults, comparisons, slights, but something had shifted. If anyone called me now, I wouldn't just listen. I'd document. I'd stop being the son who disappeared, the brother who stayed quiet. I'd become the one person they could no longer misinterpret. As if the universe decided to test that promise, my screen lit up again. This time I recognized the name before it fully appeared. Maribel. Her name felt like the echo of a headache. I let the phone ring twice, watching the letters glow. Then I answered. The recorder turned on automatically. Cass. She burst out in a chirpy tone, the same one she used whenever she wanted to appear competent in public. Good news, I finally took care of Grandma's condo. Sold it last week. Cash offer. Smooth as butter. I let her talk. Let her gush. Let her believe she still held the upper hand. She kept going. Everyone at home was relieved. That place was such a burden with all the taxes and maintenance. Honestly, you should thank me. I'll send you a little something you know for your life over there. Must be expensive in Japan. She said it like she was doing charity. Like the condo hadn't belonged to me. Like she hadn't gutted the last piece of my grandmother's love and turned it into personal profit. My voice stayed even when I finally spoke. You sold it. Yes, she said proudly. Handled everything. You're welcome. And you signed the papers. Silence for a beat. Then a flutter of fake innocence. Well, someone had to. You're always too slow. And you don't understand legal stuff, Cass. Dean makes everything dramatic. I just got it done. You signed my name. She inhaled sharp. Jarek, don't start. You're overthinking again. No, I said, still calm. Dean found inconsistencies. The notary stamp isn't legitimate. The signature doesn't match. Her tone cracked. You're being ridiculous. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the rain sliding down the glass. Did you practice my signature, Maribel? Silence. Then her mistake. I only did it a few times, okay? Just enough to make it look right. You should be grateful I saved you the hassle. The recorder caught every syllable. When I told her Dean was already looking into the fraud, her voice shifted again, dropping sweet, entirely slipping into warning. Don't do this, Jarek. You'll embarrass the family. For once, I said softly, you should be worried about the truth, not me. She hung up on me. I sat there for a moment, not angry, not shaking, just steady. I saved the recording as Maribel Calbo on one evidence and emailed it to Dean with one line. If this goes to court, I'll repeat every word. Then I stepped out onto the balcony. The rain had thinned into a mist, drifting like smoke across the alley. For the first time, being an ocean away didn't feel like a disadvantage. It felt like armor. Distance wasn't isolating me anymore. It was protecting me, giving me room to aim, to respond, to fight. And I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, the air in my apartment felt different. The kind of stillness that comes before someone else's world starts to fall apart. The sky was a washed-out gray, the light in the room dim and muted. I was organizing the evidence folder on my laptop when my phone buzzed again. Then again. Then again. At first, I ignored it, expecting spam. But when the rhythm shifted to rapid fire, I glanced at the screen. 6 missed calls from Maribel. I didn't answer. Instead, I let my phone rest on the desk, face up, vibrating like something alive. Messages rolled in. What are you doing? Pick up. This isn't funny. Call me back as your brother. I didn't reply. Then Dean called. His tone was controlled, but there was something deliberate behind it. Jarek, the judge, approved my request. The funds from the condo sale are frozen. The bank will notify her any minute now. I let that sink in, imagining the exact moment Maribel would realize the money she'd already planned to use was locked. Good, I said. She'll come at you harder today, Dean warned. Just stay calm." Minutes later, Maribel called again. The 7th call. I accepted. She didn't say hello. She screamed. "My account is frozen. Cash frozen. The bank said there's a legal investigation. What did you do?" Her panic felt like a sharp contrast to how casually she'd bragged the day before. "Nothing," I said. "The truth did that." "You're ruining my life," she spit out. "I already put down a deposit on the new house, Jarek. Do you hear me? I need that money, and I needed you to not forge my name," I answered. My voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. She ranted, cursed, sobbed in short, ugly bursts. Then she fell into silence, breathing hard. "You're heartless." "No," I said. "I'm finally being fair." Before she could respond, another call tried to break in. My phone flashed with my mother's name. I sighed and switched over. Mom didn't yell. She pleaded. "Jarek, sweetheart, listen to me." She began, her voice trembling with a kind of desperation that wasn't for me. "Don't do this to your sister. The poor girl has been carrying the weight of this family on her back." She was trying to help. "By signing for a dead woman," I asked. "Don't say it like that. There's no other way to say it." "You've always been too sensitive," she snapped, switching from pleading to condescending in a heartbeat. "You make everything bigger than it is." I almost laughed. "You're asking me to ignore a felony." "It's family," she cried. "Exactly," I said, "and that's why it hurts." Before she could argue further, another call came through, a number from Florida. I didn't recognize it, but something in me already knew who it had to be. I picked up. A low male voice asked, "Is this Jarek Rourke?" "Yes. This is one of the buyers of the condo. Why has the transaction been halted?" So now they were panicking too. "You'll need to speak with your attorney," I said evenly. "Are we being dragged into something?" he demanded. "You already were," I answered. "You just didn't know it." The man muttered a curse and hung up, and for the first time I realized the ripple of what Maribel had done was widening far beyond our family. It wasn't just my inheritance at stake anymore. It was a domino chain of people, money, and signatures collapsing on top of each other, and my name was at the center only because someone else had put it there. When the calls finally stopped, I set my phone down and sat at the edge of my bed. The room was quiet again, but not peaceful. It felt like the pause between lightning and thunder. Except this time, I wasn't the one waiting to get struck. I was the one watching the sky split open. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt in control. I wasn't just protecting a condo. I was reclaiming the part of myself that had been dismissed, ignored, and minimized for so long. This wasn't about property. It was about my place in a family that had never truly seen me. And I finally understood that if I didn't fight now, I would always be the one they expected to stay silent. The night had that sharp Kyoto chill that slips through your jacket no matter how tightly you pull it closed. I walked along the philosopher's path, the stone walkway slick from late autumn drizzle, the air smelling faintly of cedar and wet earth. It was one of the few places where my mind usually felt settled, but tonight even the quiet couldn't hold me still. I kept replaying the calls, the threats, the lies, the way Maribel's voice cracked when she realized her money was gone. I couldn't decide if I felt vindicated or just tired. My phone buzzed, slicing through the stillness. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. A man's low voice came through, cautious, almost apologetic. "Jarek, this is Sawyer. Maribel's husband." I stopped walking. The way he whispered, "Can we talk without her around," told me more than his words. A door clicked shut on his end, followed by a long exhale like he'd been holding his breath for months. He didn't waste time. "She lied to me," he said. "About the will. About you. She told me you'd given up your claim years ago. Said you didn't want anything tying you back to the family." There was a bitterness in his voice I'd never heard before. I believed her. I didn't want to think she was capable of all this. I leaned against the railing, overlooking the shallow creek below. "You didn't freeze her account," I said. "The court did. For fraud." "I know," he said quietly. "The bank called this morning." That's when I realized something was very wrong. She panicked, started screaming, kept saying you were sabotaging her out of jealousy. He hesitated. But I've been looking through her files, Jarek. There's more. My grip tightened around the phone. What do you mean more? He swallowed. The buyer, the one who purchased the condo. He isn't just some stranger. He used to work with your aunt. They've had shady deals before. Land disputes, lawsuits. Your grandmother even fought him once over property rights. Maribel didn't find him by accident. He sent me a photo, a contract. The image loaded slowly, the glow of my phone reflecting off the wet pavement. At the bottom of the agreement, beneath the forged signatures and fake stamps, was a handwritten clause: all parties agree to remain silent regarding the nature of this transaction. My stomach turned. This wasn't a simple betrayal. It was a backdoor deal built on connections, fear, and profit. She involved the family, I murmured. That's the part you really need to understand, Sawyer said. Your mother had a meeting with her a month before the sale. She didn't know about the forgery, but she knew Maribel wanted to sell. She told her to handle it however she could, to avoid tax complications. For a moment, it felt like Kyoto tilted under my feet. My own mother had chosen to look the other way, not to protect me, not to honor my grandmother's wishes, but to keep the family comfortable even if it meant letting Maribel bulldoze through a dead woman's legacy. So they all knew, I whispered. They didn't know everything, Sawyer said gently, but they knew enough, and they didn't stop her. He went quiet, then added, I'm done covering for her. If this goes to court, I'll testify, whatever you need. She crossed a line I can't defend. His voice wasn't angry. It was tired, defeated. The way people sound when they finally accept the truth about someone they love. I thanked him, though the words tasted strange coming out. When he hung up, I stayed standing there under the lantern glow, my breath fogging in the cold air. I wasn't just up against my sister anymore. I was up against the system our family had built, favoritism disguised as love, silence disguised as loyalty. Back in my apartment, I forwarded everything to Dean: the photo of the contract, the call summary, every detail Sawyer had given me. My hands didn't shake this time. They felt steady, grounded. I closed my laptop and said out loud to no one but the empty room, I'm done being quiet. And for the first time, I meant it all the way through. That evening, my apartment felt smaller than usual. The yellow glow from the desk lamp pooled across the wooden table where my phone sat waiting. It looked almost ceremonial, like a spotlight marking the place where something irreversible was about to happen. Dean had emailed earlier saying Maribel's side wanted a private negotiation, hoping to settle things before federal charges locked in. I didn't trust their motives, but I agreed. Not because I wanted peace, because I wanted everything out in the open. When the video call loaded, the screen split into boxes, my mother, my Aunt Maribel blotchy-faced and trembling, Sawyer in the corner looking hollow, and Dean steady as ever. The tension was so thick it felt like another presence in the room. My mother spoke first. Jarek, honey, we're family. None of us want this to go to court. Maribel was already crying, the tears too sudden to be sincere. Please, she begged, don't do this to me. Think about everything we've been through as siblings. I didn't answer. Instead, I clicked the file on my screen and hit play. My recorded call with Maribel filled the speakers. Her bragging voice, her admissions, her slip about practicing my signature. Every word echoed in the virtual room. My mother's face drained of color. My aunt looked like she'd been slapped. Sawyer stared down at his hands. Maribel covered her mouth and sobbed. You had no right to record me. You had no right to sign for me, I replied. Before she could gather another excuse, Dean cleared his throat. There's more. The buyer's attorney sent us a letter. If they lose their funds because of this fraudulent sale, they will pursue legal action against the entire Rourke family. My mother shot upright. What, why us? Because Dean said the sale appears coordinated within your family. The buyer intends to argue complicity. Silence swept the call. Not regret. Fear. That was when my aunt leaned forward, her tone suddenly diplomatic. Jarek, sweetheart, maybe we can all agree this was a misunderstanding. Perhaps the will wasn't as clear as we thought. If you're willing to sign a statement acknowledging some ambiguity, we can pay you $120,000 from the sale. A fair compromise. I stared at her. You want me to rewrite my grandmother's wishes to protect the person who violated them? It's better for everyone, she insisted. We can put this behind us. I'm not putting anything behind me, I said. Not anymore. Maribel's tears stopped instantly, replaced by a cold, angry glare. My mother's jaw tightened. And then came the sentence I had never heard from her in my entire life. If you take this to court, she said quietly, don't bother coming home again. The words hung there sharp as glass. I didn't hesitate. I left home a long time ago. Something inside me closed in that moment, not a wound, but a door. A door I realized had been cracked open for years, waiting for them to step through with honesty. They never did. Now it's shut for good. I switched off my camera, leaving only my voice. I'm not trying to destroy this family. I'm trying to stop a lie from becoming the truth. No one responded. Not Maribel. Not my mother. Not my aunt. Only Sawyer in a small voice said, I'm sorry, Cass. I ended the call. The room felt bigger now, the air lighter. As I sat alone in the quiet, the city murmured outside my window, bicycles rolling over wet pavement, a train passing at a distance, raindrops tapping a steady rhythm. Kyoto didn't judge me. Kyoto didn't ask me to choose silence over justice. I opened my email and wrote to Dean, move forward. No concessions. Then I closed my laptop and let the weight lift off my shoulders, one slow breath at a time. This was no longer about a condo. This was about finally choosing myself. By the time the final video meeting began, Kyoto was drenched in rain. My apartment felt like a courtroom lit by a single warm lamp. When all the screens loaded, I saw my mother trying to hold her expression together, my aunt fidgeting, Maribel looking wrecked. Sawyer sitting stiff in the corner, the buyer's attorneys waiting with tight jaws, and a notary representative prepared to testify. Dean nodded at me once, and then everything began. He shared his screen, walking everyone through the timeline. Documents, signatures, transfer logs, stamps, every piece of the story laid out like evidence in a trial. Maribel kept her voice soft, pretending she had simply tried to help. My mother avoided my eyes as if looking directly at me might shatter whatever story she'd built in her head. Dean paused. There's one more thing. I clicked the recording. Her voice filled the room. The bragging, the self-satisfaction, the casual way she talked about handling everything. The careless admission that she practiced my signature. Every person on the call heard it. Even the rain outside seemed to freeze. Maribel's hands flew to her face. You violated my privacy, she cried. No, I said. You violated the law. The notary representative spoke next, steady and clinical. The stamp on this deed does not belong to any commissioned notary in Georgia. It's fabricated, completely invalid. My mother inhaled sharply. My aunt murmured something under her breath. The buyer's attorneys exchanged looks that weren't sympathetic. Then Sawyer quietly unmuted himself. I need to speak, he said. He faced me directly. Maribel lied to me. She said you didn't want the condo. She said you gave up the claim. I believed her. I shouldn't have. He forwarded the screenshots and documents he'd discovered, messages, contract photos, the part where she begged him not to interfere. The buyer's attorney leaned forward. We were not made aware of any fraudulent activity. We will fully cooperate with the investigation. Which meant you're on your own, Maribel. My aunt tried one last time. Can we resolve this among ourselves? This doesn't need to become public, Dean cut her off. It already is. And falsifying legal documents is not a family misunderstanding. For the first time, I spoke. For years, I stayed quiet because I thought no one would believe me. I let things slide until silence became my reputation. And you all used that silence. You used it to justify rewriting Grandma's wishes. You used it to excuse decisions that were never yours to make. My mother's tears fell, but she didn't defend herself. Maribel glared through her screen, voice cracking with bitterness. You were always her favorite. I did everything for this family. I deserved something. No one deserves what someone else was given, I replied. And certainly not through stealing it. The call ended with Dean summarizing the next steps. The evidence was more than enough to proceed legally. The property would be returned to me pending final paperwork, and the buyer would receive their refund through legal channels. Halfway through the conclusion, Maribel stood up and walked out of frame, leaving a black screen behind her. After the meeting, I stayed at my desk for a long moment. The apartment felt hollow, but not empty. Something inside me had cracked open, releasing a pressure I'd carried for years. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like breath after drowning. And for the first time since the call began, I understood something simple and painful. The truth wasn't loud. It was steady. Tonight it had finally been heard. A week later, I landed in Savannah for the first time in years. The city felt exactly the same: humid air, moss-draped trees, sidewalks cracked with age, yet I felt completely different walking through it. The condo stood quietly on its corner the way it had when I was a kid. A place that once meant safety, belonging, possibility. Now it held the ending of something old and the beginning of something I hadn't allowed myself to imagine yet. Dean arranged a meeting with Maribel's attorney. Maribel didn't come. Her lawyer opened with an offer: $180,000 if I agreed to stop the legal process. I read it, then slid the paper back. No, I said simply. If she wants this to end outside a courtroom, she accepts responsibility. I listed the conditions slowly, without anger, just certainty. She would write a notarized apology admitting her actions. She would repay the buyers fully from her own funds. She would send a letter of confession to the entire family. And she would sign a legal agreement ensuring she never interfered with anything my grandmother left again. Her lawyer argued. Dean shut him down. Your client is getting mercy, he said, not punishment. After several phone calls and a long silence, the attorney returned with a resigned expression. She'll sign. When the PDF arrived later that night, I opened it alone. The words were blunt and clinical, no excuses, no softened phrasing, just the truth. Seeing it in writing felt heavier than any argument we'd had. Her signature at the bottom trembled slightly. The legal steps that followed moved quickly. The condo reverted to me. The buyers were refunded. Maribel sold the house she'd tried to buy and took a loss she couldn't dodge. None of it brought satisfaction. It wasn't supposed to. It was the price of her choices, not my revenge. Before leaving Savannah, I visited the condo one last time. It was empty now, but I could still feel my grandmother in every corner, the chair she used to sit in the window. She watched sunsets from the table where she encouraged me to draw. I could have kept the place, but holding on to it felt like holding on to the wound. I sold it and let it go. On my last morning, I stopped by Silas's house. He handed me a small wooden box, worn smooth by time. Your grandmother wanted you to have this, he said. Inside was her silver watch and a short letter. Jarek, standing up for yourself is the last gift you can give me. I closed my eyes and let the words settle. Weeks later, back in Austin, I opened my art studio, Harlow Creative House. The sun spilled across the floor on opening day, warm and familiar, like something blessing the space. I wore my grandmother's watch on my wrist, its ticking soft and steady. I thought of Maribel, about the house she lost, the marriage she was trying to repair, the reflection she now had to face. I didn't hate her anymore. Hate would have kept me tethered to a story that was finally ending. Instead, I hoped she'd learn the truth I spent years running from. Worth isn't something anyone gets to take from you, and silence is not the same thing as peace. That morning, I stood in the doorway of my new studio, sunlight on my hands, and whispered, "I stood up, Grandma." And for the first time in my life, I felt like I finally had. Some stories don't end with triumph or applause, they end with understanding. And that's what this journey became for me. Not a fight over property, not even a fight with my sister, but a fight to finally claim the space I'd spent years shrinking away from. Standing up for myself didn't magically fix everything. It didn't heal every bruise from my childhood or erase the silence I carried for so long, but it gave me a new beginning. And sometimes a new beginning is the only justice we really need. If you've ever had to defend your worth or walk away from people who kept taking pieces of you because they thought you wouldn't notice, then maybe you understand a little of what this meant. Maybe you fought your own quiet battles, and maybe you're still fighting them. Before you go, I'd love to know you're here with me. Tell me where you're watching from, or just type a simple "still here." It means more than you think to know someone out there is listening. And if this story touched something in you, even a small part, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps these stories find the people who need them, and it lets me keep sharing them with you. Thank you for staying with me until the end.